talk a little baseball. Pitchers and catchers right around the corner. Haven't spoken to Buster Olney in a long time, and it's good to catch up with ESPN's Buster Olney. Does a great job covering baseball. How you been, Buster?
I'm doing great, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to catch up. Long time. It's been a minute, and let's get right into it. All right, let's get to this whole St. Louis Cardinals hacking issue here. $2 million fine. You give up a couple draft picks. I mean, let's be honest, 56th and 75th draft picks. I mean, that's come on, what kind of value is that? And then the $2 million, to me, it's chump change. Let me get your sentiment on the scandal itself, the hacking issue, Commissioner Mansford's ruling, and what's the sentiment from those executives around baseball that you've spoken with? Do they think this is stiff, not stiff enough, dropping the hat, not harsh enough?
Well, obviously, it's a big deal. Chris Correa, the Cardinals scouting director, is going to serve 46 months in prison. That's what his sentence was. And I know from talking with folks in Major League Baseball, when we talk about whether or not the penalty that came down from the commissioner's office the other day, and the question of whether or not it's a deterrent, as someone said to me, well, look, the real deterrent is this is a federal crime, and he's going to pay for that. And baseball felt like that as it tried to develop information, they weren't able to establish that anybody in the Cardinals organization other than Correa was involved in this. But I can tell you flat out that folks with other teams were really unhappy with the penalty. They thought it was far too light, that the punishment did not fit the crime, and they were unhappy. You mentioned the draft picks they gave up, 56 and 75. They thought the Cardinals should have been whacked for their 2018 first-round pick. They don't have a first-round pick next summer because they signed Dexter Fowler and gave up that pick. And you make a great point about $2 million in the current climate and context in baseball. That is a drop in the bucket. The Cardinals are an organization that probably makes something in the range of $300 million a year, and it really doesn't mean that much. Baseball says it's unprecedented, this penalty. Folks with other teams say they should have gotten whacked for a lot more.
Well, let's go back to something you said. In fairness, you're right. It is unprecedented. I mean, you're talking about someone that really violated another team. And again, we can dissect that all day long. The bottom line is you got one person. They go rogue. Maybe the franchise distance himself from that person. Obviously, the punishment is fitting the crime in that regard for the jail time that'll be getting. But you're right. I mean, forget about the money. And to me, it's the draft picks. Like, why not? Why not say, okay, this is we're taking away your draft picks for the next 3 years? I mean, do you think Manford? And I don't want to say that he's currying favor because that's not what a commissioner should do, or is this because it's never been done before? It is a precedent event where you have to you got to come up with some type of punishment.
Yeah, the reality is because one of Rob's great patron saints in the sport is Bill DeWitt, who's the chairman of the Cardinals. Is one of his great allies when Rob ascended to the position of commissioner. Everybody in baseball knows that, and so when this process started, Rob was swimming upstream against that perception. And unless he came down absolutely hard with a hammer, people around baseball were going to gripe about it. And he really was in the same position, I think, that Roger Goodell was when he was dealing with the Patriots and Kraft. And, if with the whole Deflategate thing, if he didn't come down hard, he was going to be criticized. Do I think he could have gone one step further? Absolutely. Because I had people tell me before the punishment came down, look, if you take a second-round pick, that's not that big of a deal. That doesn't really hurt that much. And, this is a huge crime. And folks in baseball were hoping, especially after last year when he rendered a punishment against the Red Sox,
right,
in which he essentially stripped their ability to participate in the international market for a whole year. Their feeling was that this should have been a much harsher penalty, and nobody around baseball believes the idea that Chris Correa was the only one in the Cardinals organization who knew what was going on. They can't prove it,
right,
but they don't believe it.
It's like the elephant in the room. Everyone kind of knows, but no one's saying it. You make a couple fair points on that one. Again, a couple minutes with ESPN's Buster Olney. Does a great job covering baseball, of course, for ESPN.com as well. Pitchers and catchers right around the corner. All right, let's get to the Hall of Fame and the Hall of Fame voting. Raines, Bagwell, Pudge Rodriguez. Let me get your thoughts on those three. Did you have any issue with those three getting in?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I stopped voting 3 years ago.
I know.
But I certainly thought Range was a Hall of Famer. I certainly thought that Ivan Rodriguez, one of the greatest catchers of all time, was a Hall of Famer, and I thought Bagwell was a Hall of Famer. I do think that last year when Piazza got in, obviously despite a lot of suspicion from writers who hadn't voted for him in the past and decided to vote for him, regardless of what they think about the PED issue, I think once he got in, that starts the train moving toward when guys, linked to PEDs, and certainly Ivan Rodriguez has been, Bagwell, suspicions there. Down the road, I think at some point, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, their chances for getting in get better.
Okay, I know you haven't had a vote in a couple years, but I know when you had a vote, we used to talk about this years ago. Here's. And again, I'm not going after you. I say this with respect for writers. This is where I do have one problem with some of the writers, though, that are making some of these votes. And baseball. You know the history of baseball, so you know exactly where I'm going with this. It seems as though a lot of the writers I've spoken to, you can tell right away when they have a hidden agenda against said player. And they want to, because they have that power and they have that vote, they want to stick it to the player, and they don't want to vote for. And you can talk about the Jim Rices. Some people, I can argue Albert Bell as well. But some of the writers I've spoken to, they flat out have told me that they're not voting for certain players, not because of this a suspicion of PED. Well, the guy was a jerk. Yeah, okay, but what about his numbers? What about what he meant to the game of baseball? That's kind of where I'm starting to have an issue, because if that's the case, then why the heck do you vote for the same players during the regular season to win Cy Young and MVPs? To me, it's a contradiction.
It is absolutely a contradiction, and in general, I don't think the writers should be involved in the Hall of Fame voting anymore. I don't think it's our job to make news, which is part of the reason why I stopped voting. But I thought the candidacy of Curt Schilling this year was the absolutely perfect example of that. He lost something in the range of 20 to 25 votes versus what he got last year, which is a almost unprecedented drop of, I think it was 8% in his voting total, because of some tweets he sent out during the course of the year, maybe because of his political stance. And I wrote at the time it happened, it's a terrible look for the writers, because it, for a lot of fans, I'm sure it affirms a stereotype that writers do use personal feelings about players to determine who they're going to vote for. And I think the vast majority of writers don't. I know how seriously Jason Stark takes it, and Tim Kurkjian and Peter Gammons. But when this happens with 20, 25 writers over Curt Schilling's things that he did in the last year, I think it really looks awful for the writers, because the guy has not participated in a game in almost a decade, and he's losing votes. That doesn't make sense.
And then conversely, Roger Clemens jumps from 45.2% to 54.1%. Barry Bonds goes from 44.3% to 53.8%. So it tells me that a lot of the old school writers who were so adamant, there's no way in heck that I'm voting for these guys that are under that PED suspicion, that cloud, that have been pinched before. And now all of a sudden it seems as though eventually it's going to trend up and they're going to open up the gates for all these guys.
The question is, will Bonds and Clemens run out of time on the ballot before they get to the needed 75%? Each of them have had 5 years on the ballot. They've got 5 years left. And look, when you have issues like those two do with their candidacies, and if I still voted, I would definitely vote for them, but the PED stuff absolutely hangs on them like anchors. We don't know if they're going to get to that point. I think what's happened over time as well, as I mentioned, when a Mike Piazza gets in spite of suspicions, Bagwell, Ivan Rodriguez, I do think that more and more writers are looking at it within the context and saying, you know what, if some writers thought that 5-10 years ago they wanted a Hall of Fame that was quote unquote clean, they're not going to worry about that anymore, and they're just going to vote for the best players of the era. That's the way I looked at it, years ago, and I think the writers should have done that. But for whatever reason, a lot of writers have set themselves up in a position of being retroactive morality police on the PED issue.
Yeah, and then you look at a guy like Vlad Guerrero, who I don't know if it's his war figure that hurt him, but to me, he's a Hall of Famer. 11 straight years he had MVP votes. You talk about the value that he meant on the field. Hit over 300, right-handed bat, 25 homers every year during that span. I think he averaged over 100 ribbies. And then and I won't name who it was, but I had on a couple weeks ago that we got in an argument. I don't think a guy like Mussina is a Hall of Famer. I understand it's all subjective, but tell me how a guy like Guerrero doesn't get in this year.
That was a big surprise for me. A lifetime 318 hitter. I disagree with you on Messina. I think you put in the context that he was in the American League East during his entire career during the steroid era, and his record's pretty phenomenal. But you can have debates about that. I think generally speaking, whether it's Vladimir Guerrero, Mike Messina, Curt Schilling, I think some of these guys have lost votes because of this ballot rule of 10 that the Hall of Fame refuses to adjust. And I think it's a disservice to the players because that arbitrary number of 10 is being the maximum number of players you can vote for in a given year. What that means is a lot of players are not being judged on the merits of their candidacies, but on how they fit onto a ballot, and they're getting really hurt by this logjam of steroid candidates like Clemens, like Bonds, who just keep retreading year after year after year, and they keep shoving off players like Vladimir Guerrero off the ballot. Yeah,
I got to get my customary Yankee question in before I let you get out of here. What and we'll do Phillies as the season rolls along. What are the chances the White Sox, who look like they're in ultimate rebuild mode, they ship out Robertson back to the Yankees? And what do you think the Yankees would have to give up?
Well, I think the one thing that it's worth remembering is that, like a lot of teams now, since the new collective bargaining agreement went into effect, the Yankees are absolutely devoted to the idea of getting under the salary tax, the luxury tax. And so, which is why, even after they signed Aroldis Chapman and some of the prices have dropped in the free agent market, you haven't seen them that engaged. They haven't been out there grabbing 2 or 3 relievers to bolster their team because they're trying to reduce costs. So, if they ever make a move for someone like David Robertson, the only way it's going to happen would be if the White Sox basically ate his money.
Yeah.
Or if they can find some taker for Brett Gardner. I know the Yankees have been very surprised that other teams have not placed a higher value on Brett Gardner and been willing to eat more of his salary. And so as it stands now, they're going to keep him to start the year.
All right, it's right around the corner. Pitchers and catchers, baseball can't get to April enough, especially with some of these what transpired during the NFL season. Do you have a Super Bowl pick, or am I putting you on the spot if I?
No, I just think in this case that the experience is going to manifest itself. That Super Bowl week.
That's
Brady,
the political correctness answer.
No, it's not. That's what I believe. Having seen that, you're going to have a bunch of players for the Falcons who are going to go in there bright eyes.
Loosey-goosey.
Yeah, well, no, and the Patriots are going to go in there and go, okay, we've done this, here's the process, and they're going to win.
All right. Hey, look forward to talking during the baseball season. Great to catch up, Buster. Appreciate it, pal.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, you got it. Buster Olney from ESPN. A couple good points.